Another year means another round of movies that you won't want to miss. From epic adaptations of classic literature to high-profile horror flicks, you'll definitely want to put these movies on your calendar for 2026. It's impossible to deny that Steven Spielberg is responsible for some of the greatest films in cinema history. From monster movies like Jurassic Park to war dramas like Saving Private Ryan, there's nothing that Spielberg can't do. That said, one of his favorite topics to explore is first contact with aliens, as he did in E.T., War of the Worlds, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Sure enough, Spielberg's first project since 2022's The Fabelmans is the mysterious sci-fi film Disclosure Day. Even though we've already gotten a trailer for Disclosure Day, there's still a lot we don't know about it. What we do know is that it stars Emily Blunt and Josh O'Connor as humans in search of answers, who hope to share their findings with the entire world.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world. All at once.
What's the deal with that weird clicking sound? Why are all those animals acting so strangely? The truth will be disclosed on June 12th. When the Mission Impossible series wrapped up in 2025, all eyes were on Tom Cruise to see what he would do next. He'd already teamed up with Birdman director Alejandro G. Iñárritu for a then-untitled movie with a 2026 release date and an intriguingly vague description. The most powerful man in the world embarks on a frantic mission to prove he is humanity's savior before the disaster he's unleashed destroys everything. So, who's the most powerful man in the world? A tech CEO, the president? Turns out it's just a guy with a shovel. Cruise plays the title character in Digger, which is also described as a comedy of catastrophic proportions. He's joined by Sandra Hüller, John Goodman, Jesse Plemons, and plenty of other acclaimed actors. Get ready to see a new side of Cruise when Digger tunnels into theaters on October 2nd. Horror fans ate well in 2019 thanks to titles like Midsommar and Us, but one of the funniest and bloodiest offerings that year was the surprise hit Ready or Not. Starring Samara Weaving as Grace, a newlywed who's forced to play a game of deadly hide-and-seek with her in-laws, it made nearly 10 times its budget and solidified Weaving's status as a modern-day scream queen.
Rich people!
7 years later, the story continues right where it left off with Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. The long-awaited sequel raises the stakes by forcing Grace into a second game that might just determine the fate of the entire world. It drags Grace's sister, Faith, played by Lisa Frankenstein star Catherine Newton, into the mix as well. Once again directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett from Radio Silence Productions, Ready or Not 2 is a must-see if you're a horror fan, or if you just want to see Elijah Wood play a villainous lawyer. Whatever your motivations might be, you won't want to miss it when it releases on March 27th. Michael Jackson was a musical sensation, an unparalleled showman, and one of the most recognizable people in the world. Then, just like that, he was gone. 17 years after his untimely death, Jackson's legacy lives on within the most anticipated biopic of 2026, Michael. Starring Michael's real-life nephew, Jafar Jackson, as the king of pop, Michael depicts his ascent from troubled child star to larger-than-life icon. That includes his bombastic performances, recording sessions, and if the casting of Miles Teller as Jackson's attorney is any indication, maybe even some of his controversies. Anton Fuqua, the filmmaker behind Training Day and The Equalizer, took on directing duties for this long-awaited project. Expect a lengthy runtime, and if we don't get that, expect to see Michael Part 2 sometime in the future. Either way, Michael moonwalks its way to the big screen on April 24th. Sure, Hollywood may have gone a little overboard with legacy sequels in recent years, but we're not passing up the chance to see Meryl Streep step back into the shoes of the outrageously bossy fashion icon Miranda Priestly.
I need 10 or 15 skirts from Calvin Klein.
Okay, what kind of skirts do you use?
Please bore someone else with your questions.
The Devil Wears Prada was nothing less than a sensation in 2006. The story of a frazzled journalist turned assistant and her dictator of a boss resonated with a lot of people and made a ton of money. 20 years later, The Devil Wears Prada 2 hopes to recapture the magic by adapting the sequel to the original novel with David Frankel directing once again. Streep isn't the only returning cast member, thankfully. There's Stanley Tucci, Emily Blunt, and of course Anne Hathaway. As for first-timers to the franchise, the list of supporting actors includes huge names like Lucy Liu, Lady Gaga, and many more. The Devil Wears Prada 2 hits the runway on May 1st. It looks like 2026 is going to be a big year for Anne Hathaway. Not only is she in The Devil Wears Prada 2, but she's also the lead role and title character in the psychological thriller Mother Mary. David Lowery, the filmmaker behind such haunting tales as A Ghost Story and The Green Knight, wrote and directed this chilling tale. Hathaway's Mother Mary is a troubled pop star in need of a new dress who reunites with her estranged former fashion designer, played by Michaela Coel. What follows is a battle for power and control that might just involve a supernatural force of some kind, with original music contributed by Jack Antonoff, Charlie XCX, and FKA Twigs. Mother Mary might just end up being a surprise hit for A24. We'll just have to wait until April to find out. Christopher Nolan keeps finding ways to push boundaries, which he proved with both the extremely divisive and confusing Tenet and the Oscar-winning powerhouse that was Oppenheimer. Of course, anything he's put out in the last 20 years or so has been a pretty major event, but he still continues to outdo himself in new and unexpected ways. And for that reason, we're thrilled to watch his take on the Odyssey. Based on the epic poem of the same name, this will be Nolan's first attempt at an old-fashioned swords and sandals saga, like 2004's Troy or the Gladiator franchise. And that's not the only way he's breaking the mold with this one. The Odyssey is a much more fantasy and mythology-heavy story than anything he's directed before, and we can't wait to see how he handles his concepts on the big screen. The movie started filming in February 2025 with Matt Damon in the lead role, and as big an undertaking as this project is, it looks like we only have to wait until July 17th, 2026 to see the final product. Though Sam Raimi has spent a lot of time in the world of big-budget Hollywood blockbusters in recent years, he cut his teeth in the horror genre. But now that efforts like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Oz the Great and Powerful are years behind him, Raimi is stepping back into horror with his new film, Send Help. Rachel McAdams stars as Linda, a white-collar worker who's constantly belittled by her awful boss, played by Dylan O'Brien. When a business trip turns into a plane crash and the two wake up on a deserted island together, the balance of power dramatically changes.
Let's not forget, I'm your boss. You work for me.
We're not in the office anymore, Bradley.
The trailer for Send Help promises a competitive battle for survival, and if this is anything like Raimi's other horror movies, you can expect things to get pretty crazy. Filming for Send Help wrapped in April and is scheduled to release on January 30th, 2026. The 28 Days Later trilogy finally met its end in 2025, with the release of the aptly named 28 Years Later. And though 28 Years Later arrived a full 23 years after the original movie, it's just a start for the franchise in some ways. 28 Years Later also marks the beginning of a spin-off series, and its follow-up 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, is already set to hit theaters on January 16th, 2026. 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later writer Alex Garland is writing The Bone Temple, and will also write its follow-up. And while director Danny Boyle did helm 28 Years Later, he handed directing duties for The Bone Temple off to the Marvel's director, Nia DaCosta. Boyle will come back for the spin-off trilogy's final entry, which will mark the first time he's directed 3 films in the same franchise. Maggie Gyllenhaal only started directing in the last few years, but she's already proved that she's not messing around with her new craft. Both her film The Lost Daughter and the episode of Homemade she worked on received some serious accolades, so we're very excited for her next feature. 2026's The Bride is a monster movie written, directed, and produced by Gyllenhaal. It will be a new film based around the wife of Frankenstein's monster, and while classic movie monsters have had a rough go of it in recent years, we're optimistic that Gyllenhaal might be able to turn the tide with The Bride. If nothing else, a possibility of seeing Christian Bale's take on Frankenstein's monster will be enough for us to buy a ticket. The Bride invades theaters on March 6th.
Until death do us part.
Marvel alums Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and Barry Keoghan will join Halle Berry, Nick Nolte, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Tate Donovan for the February 2026 heist film Crime 101. Co-written by Conclave Oscar winner Peter Strawn, the movie's adapted from the Don Winslow novella of the same name. The title comes from the strict set of rules that Hemsworth's jewel thief has been following for years, which have helped him elude capture, as well as the 101 freeway where he commits his crimes. With Ruffalo as a detective hot on his trail, there's no telling what could happen in this twisty thriller. There's another Wuthering Heights adaptation in the works, and English majors everywhere are either screaming with glee or smashing their skulls against their writing desks. And while it might be easy to roll your eyes at the prospect of yet another adaptation of Emily Bronte's classic novel, this one's being directed by Emerald Fennell and may deserve the benefit of the doubt. Fennell's two previous films, Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, were both original works with relatively modern-day settings, so this will be a welcome change of pace. She's already seen some backlash for casting Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie as the leads, but she's still sticking to her guns. She even turned down Netflix's $150 million offer for the film in favor of less money and a more traditional theatrical release. With her artistic integrity still intact, we're eager to see exactly how Fennell's handled her first feature-length adaptation when it comes out on February 13th, 2026.
So kiss me, and let us both be damned.
The Scream franchise has done what many of its horror contemporaries couldn't quite pull off. It maintained a consistent canon across its first 6 films, becoming one of the longest-running horror franchises in history without so much as a soft reboot. That made the announcement that the original Scream's Matthew Lillard will be returning for Scream 7 a huge shock, given that his character met what we thought was a definitive end in the first installment. But Lillard teased his return on social media in 2025, and fans are shaking in their boots with excitement. How exactly the film will pull off Stu's return remains a close-guarded secret, so we'll just have to see for ourselves when it comes out on February 27, 2026. Spider-Man is one of the only pieces of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that has gotten consistently high-quality treatments and solid box office returns. Even more impressively, Marvel pulled out all the nostalgic subs for Spider-Man No Way Home, which leaves very little left to do in terms of fan service.
Would you look at that?
So it seems fitting that the next entry in the series is subtitled Brand New Day. Peter Parker will be joined by the Hulk and Punisher in the final MCU film before Doomsday arrives. Currently, the film has its web shooters aimed at a July 31st, 2026 release date. Few directors have kicked off their careers more impressively than Robert Eggers. The first 4 films he directed and co-wrote are all certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and the many fans of his work live in a constant state of waiting for whatever he's cooking up next, even if they don't have any details. Which is why, even though we know next to nothing about Werwolf, we're ready to bet it will make waves in 2026. Eggers is once again slated to direct and co-write this period piece horror, which is set in 13th century England and presumably involves a werewolf. And while its Christmas 2026 release date may feel far away now, that just gives his audience even more time to start salivating over it. Fans of The Northman will be particularly delighted about this one, as its co-writer, Sion, teamed back up with Eggers to write it. Though their names haven't been associated with the series in a long time, brothers Keenan Ivory, Sean, and Marlon Wayans were the comedic minds that came up with the concept for the Scream-focused horror spoof Scary Movie. After the original success, they came back for Scary Movie 2, but abandoned the franchise completely for the 3 movies that followed. The reason for this schism was conflict with Dimension Films heads Harvey and Bob Weinstein over money and creative control.
They were terrible people. Terrible people.
But in October 2024, it was announced that the Wayans brothers would return to the franchise for Scary Movie 6, which is set for release on June 12, 2026. Both brothers serve as writers, producers, and actors, reprising the roles they played back in the early 2000s. The live-action Resident Evil film series that ran from 2002 to 2016 certainly had its lows, but it was popular enough to earn 6 installments and gross a combined $1.2 billion worldwide. But after the 2021 reboot, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, underperformed, it was back to the drawing board for the action horror adaptations. Luckily, Raccoon City wasn't the death sentence it could have been, and film studios burst into a bidding war over the rights to the zombie franchise. Fans of the game and recent horror will likely be thrilled to learn that Barbarian and Weapons director Zach Kreger is signed on to direct and co-write the new reboot, which is scheduled to release on September 18th, 2026. The only question now is, what's it called?
Honestly, I don't know.
You don't know?
That's right, Redfield, I do not know.
When it came out, the general consensus was that Toy Story 3 saw the perfect ending for Woody, Buzz, and the rest of Andy's toy collection. So a lot of people were understandably skeptical when the news broke that a 4th Toy Story movie was coming to screens. Even so, Toy Story 4 cracked the $1 billion mark worldwide and received nearly the same amount of praise as its predecessor. And now that they've proved the doubters wrong once, Disney and Pixar are rolling the dice on at least one more entry to the franchise. Toy Story 5 will hit theaters on June 19th, 2026. Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead trilogy was all about continuity. Well, it had the same leading man for all three at least. But since the 2013 remake came out, all we've gotten are standalone films like Evil Dead and Evil Dead Rise. And in 2026, we're in for yet another with Evil Dead Burn. Raimi may not be writing or directing, but Evil Dead Burn is being released by his company, Ghost House Pictures, and he'll be one of the movie's producers. You can expect to feel the burn on July 24th, 2026. There was a time when it seemed like the animation live-action hybrid Coyote vs. Acme was never going to see the light of day. Despite a stellar cast featuring Will Forte, John Cena, and various Looney Tunes characters, it joined fellow Warner Brothers projects Scoob, Holiday Haunt, and Batgirl in the unfortunate club of movies that had already been completed but were still cancelled for tax write-off purposes.
You gotta be kidding me. Who greenlit this garbage?
While there are currently no plans to revive the other two films, Coyote vs. Acme was rescued by independent distributor Ketchup Entertainment in 2025, alongside the previously doomed Looney Tunes film, The Day the Earth Blew Up. Thankfully, Wiley will make it to the big screen after all. Coyote vs. Acme crashes into theaters on August 28th, despite Warner Brothers' best efforts. The third entry in the modern run of Jumanji movies is toying with a December 11th, 2026 release date. So far, only Jack Black and director Jake Kasdan have outright confirmed they're returning for the new installment, but it's more than likely co-stars Dwayne Johnson, Karen Gillan, and Kevin Hart are coming back as well. So far, there's not much on the storyline of the new movie, though it's possible that it could pick up from the mid-credit scene at the end of Jumanji: The Next Level. Hart said in 2023 that early discussions about the story were largely focused on the relationship between his and Johnson's characters, and it would certainly be great to see their arc reach a conclusion. But whether that will come in this movie or a future installment remains to be seen. Filmmaker Denis Villeneuve has slowly earned a reputation for pulling off the impossible. Not only did he make a respectable sequel to Blade Runner, but he may have even surpassed the classic original with Blade Runner 2049. Then he proved that Frank Herbert's dense and seemingly unfilmable Dune novels really could be properly adapted for the big screen, with Dune and Dune Part 2. That being said, the third installment is where a lot of movie series go wrong, particularly sci-fi trilogies. So we'll see if Villeneuve can create another cinematic miracle when Dune Part 3 hits theaters on December 18th, 2026. While Disney, DreamWorks, Illumination, and Sony Pictures Animations have been battling for the title of greatest major animation studio for a few decades now, independent stop-motion house Laika has been quietly churning out some of the best animated films of our time. The company's been quiet since 2019's Missing Link came out, but that's set to change next year with Wildwood. Based on the 2011 novel of the same name, Wildwood sees a young girl and her friend try to rescue the girl's younger sister from a mysterious and dangerous magical forest. After it was originally scheduled to come out in 2025, Wildwood is now set to arrive sometime in 2026, with the exact date to be determined. After wowing critics with the inventive 2015 horror movie It Follows, writer-director David Robert Mitchell followed that up with the extremely ambitious and surreal action comedy Under the Silver Lake. But neither critics nor audiences were particularly impressed with that one. After taking a roughly 8-year break, Mitchell is making his attempt at a comeback into the film world in 2026 with Flowervale Street. So far, all we know about it is that it's a sci-fi adventure starring Ewan McGregor and Anne Hathaway. The details about the plot beyond that are scant. That said, rumors claim that it involves dinosaurs and time travel. After originally aiming for a March release, Flowervale Street is now set to come out on August 14th, 2026. The Bride and Werewolf aren't the only attempts at bringing a classic movie monster back to the big screen coming in 2026. Unfortunately, The Mummy's name gives it a lot more to live up to, considering it's following a beloved action trilogy from the late 90s and early 2000s, and a less beloved attempt at a reboot starring Tom Cruise from 2017. So it's probably wise that the people behind this latest addition to the bandaged zombie genre opted to make this one more of a horror film than an Indiana Jones-esque action-adventure. Lee Cronin, who wrote and directed Evil Dead Rise, will again serve those two jobs for The Mummy. So this take on the classic monster might actually be properly scary. Either way, it is currently set to be released on April 17th, 2026. Ever since Greta Gerwig's Barbie absolutely took over the world in 2023, fans have been desperate to find out what her next project will be. And aside from some uncredited writing on the disastrous live-action Snow White, it's looking like that is going to be a movie set in the Narnia universe. Gerwig is specifically adapting the novel The Chronicles of Narnia, the Magician's Nephew. Technically, it was the 6th book published in the series, but it's chronologically a prequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If all goes well, that would make a perfect opening number for a whole new Narnia franchise.
Try me.
Currently, the film is set to have a limited IMAX release starting November 26, 2026, before coming to Netflix on Christmas Day. Of all the media the first batch of post-DCEU movies and TV shows are produced, the ones related to Batman have shown the most promise so far. 2022's The Batman film was largely well received, and its spin-off HBO series The Penguin has received even more love and critical acclaim. For that reason, many fans hope that the upcoming horror movie Clayface will continue along the same trend. Based around the longtime Batman villain of the same name, Clayface will be directed by James Watkins and is scheduled for a September 11, 2026 release. Tom Rhys-Harry stars as a title character, with Naomi Ackie serving as his love interest. It's been quite a few eventful years for fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Although the original Nickelodeon series only aired for 3 seasons in the mid to late 2000s, it has seen numerous spin-offs, reboots, and adaptations. Of course, there have been reinterpretations of the series fans would rather forget, like M. Night Shyamalan's 2010 live-action film. However, 2026 will see a much more highly anticipated installment in the Avatar timeline. It was announced all the way back in 2021 that Avatar: The Last Airbender will be getting a proper animated sequel. Titled The Legend of Aang: The Last Airbender, it promises to depict the continued adventures of the Avatar following the events of the show. Although fans were disappointed to hear the news that the film would be skipping theaters entirely in favor of a direct-to-streaming release, there's still plenty to be excited about. Eric Nam will make his debut as the voice of Aang, while Dave Bautista is joining the franchise as a yet-to-be-revealed antagonist. You'll be able to watch The Legend of Aang play out on Paramount Plus in fall 2026. Ryan Gosling has been the belle of the ball in the film world for the past few years, and 2026 might feature Gosling's next home run. Project Hail Mary, based on the 2021 sci-fi novel from Andy Weir and directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, stars Gosling as an astronaut sent on a long-shot mission to stop the sun from dying. Fortunately, he doesn't have to do it alone.
So, I met an alien. He's kind of growing on me. At least he's not growing in me, which was a concern for a little while.
Gosling will be joined by fellow Oscar nominee Sandra Hüller, who wowed audiences in 2023 with back-to-back performances in Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest. There's sure to be a lot of buzz in the science fiction community over this adaptation of the 2022 Hugo Award finalists, which rockets into cinemas on March 20th. There was rightfully a lot of trepidation leading up to the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Video game adaptations have a well-documented history of disappointing fans in movie theaters, and the Super Mario franchise already had one failed attempt in the 90s. Despite online criticisms of the cast, the Super Mario Bros. Movie grossed over $1 billion and was praised for being a flawed but worthy adaptation of the iconic Nintendo franchise. In September 2025, Nintendo and Illumination announced that everyone's favorite plumbers will be returning in the Super Mario Galaxy movie. The star-studded voice cast is back, along with 2 new big additions: Brie Larson as Princess Rosalina and Benny Safdie as Bowser Jr. Taking inspiration from one of the most widely beloved Mario games in Super Mario Galaxy, fans can expect to see plenty of familiar faces when the Super Mario Galaxy movie hits theaters on April 3rd. It's actually surprising that there hasn't been a Star Wars feature film since 2019. Still, the franchise has been busy on Disney Plus with plenty of streaming series, the most popular being The Mandalorian, which follows the adventures of the titular bounty hunter after discovering a Jedi child named Grogu, who's a target of Imperial factions. After 3 seasons of spacefaring adventures, The Mandalorian and Grogu are coming to the big screen in, you guessed it, The Mandalorian and Grogu. Joining the Star Wars universe for the first time are Sigourney Weaver, who plays former Rebel pilot Ward, and Jeremy Allen White, who plays Rotter the Hutt. The trailer has a more adventurous tone than the last 2 Star Wars installments, plus a handful of adorable aliens thrown in for good measure. You can expect The Mandalorian and Grogu to arrive in cinemas on May 22nd.
Impressive.
Everyone knew deep down that Robert Downey Jr. would return to the MCU at some point, but no one thought that it would be quite like this. At San Diego Comic-Con 2025, it was revealed that the man behind Tony Stark will be coming back as one of the most iconic villains in Marvel Comics, Victor Von Doom, in the upcoming Avengers Doomsday. The casting proved controversial, but even the biggest haters will be buying tickets to see the most anticipated superhero event of 2026. Of course, RDJ isn't the only MCU actor making a triumphant return. He's joined by Chris Evans, who's stepping back into the role of Steve Rogers for the first time since 2019, as well as far too many more actors to list here. They'll all be making their way to a theater near you on December 18th, assuming it doesn't get delayed again. A Masters of the Universe reboot movie has been in the works for over a decade now, but it's only recently that actual movement has been made on the project, with a current theatrical release date of June 5th, 2026. Travis Knight, who made his live-action directorial debut with 2018's Bumblebee, is directing for Amazon MGM Studios. Perhaps the film owes its forward motion to Mattel's success in 2023 with Barbie, which also went through development hell before becoming a surprise Best Picture nominee. It's also possible that there's renewed interest in the franchise thanks to Netflix's She-Ra and the Princess of Power, which ran for 5 seasons on the streaming service. For now, there's at least hope in the fact that the film's early casting looks promising, with the idea of U-star Nicholas Galitzine cast as He-Man and Camila Mendes of Riverdale fame playing Teela. Superman kicked off the theatrical side of James Gunn's DC Universe with a bang, earning plenty of rave reviews and introducing audiences to relatively obscure comic book characters like Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho. It was also the first appearance of Millie Alcock as Superman's cousin, Supergirl, but Kara Zor-El's time in the spotlight is far from over. She's the star of the second movie in the DCU, appropriately titled Supergirl. Taking inspiration from the comic miniseries Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl depicts a cynical hero embarking on a birthday celebration that turns into an interplanetary quest for revenge. Thankfully, she's joined by her faithful companion Crypto the Superdog.
Okay, this does not look like this is gonna end well. For you guys.
Of course, Alcock will have big boots to fill after the beloved portrayal of the character by Melissa Benoist in the CW Supergirl, but leave it to James Gunn to find new ground to break. Currently, the film is set to release on June 26, 2026, with directing duties performed by Craig Gillespie, whose past work includes female-driven films like Cruella and the Oscar-nominated I, Tonya.
Welcome, Panem, to the glorious reaping of District 12.
The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, was a reminder of how huge Suzanne Collins' book franchise was when it hit the big screen. Featuring an all-star cast, the film's box office performance alone was proof that audiences were hungry for more stories set in Panem. One is already slated for release on November 20th, 2026, centering on another familiar character from the original book trilogy. The Hunger Games, Sunrise on the Reaping centers on the 50th Hunger Games, notably won by Hamish Abernathy, the character portrayed by Woody Harrelson in the original films. Featuring 48 tributes rather than the traditional 24. Hamish's game is something that Hunger Games fans have wanted to see depicted in more detail for a long time. Starring Joseph Zada in the lead role, Sunrise on the Reaping promises a double helping of carnage that you won't want to miss.